I'm Ellie Thompson, and I'm 26. 3 days before my wedding, I discovered my mother and my fiancé were having an affair. They thought I was too stupid to notice. I wasn't. The moment I saw that text message on my mom's phone, everything clicked into place. Loved yesterday. Tell me when I can see you again. From James. My James. The man I was supposed to marry in 72 hours. My hands were steady as I scrolled through their conversation. Photos of them in my bed. My bed. Voice messages where my mother called him my love. Plans made while I worked extra shifts to pay for our dream wedding. They were laughing about how easy I was to fool. I set the phone down exactly where I found it and walked back to the kitchen where my mother sat reviewing our guest list. She looked up with that practiced smile that I now realized meant absolutely nothing. Is the coffee ready, sweetheart? Almost, I said, my voice calm as glass. Just need another minute. Inside my chest, my heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. But my brain was already planning something that would make their betrayal look like child's play. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely betrayed by the people you trusted most. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me backtrack and tell you how I ended up discovering the two people I loved most in the world were playing me for a fool. Because trust me, this story gets so much worse before it gets better. Growing up as Karen Thompson's daughter meant growing up smaller than I should have been. My mother had this talent for making everything I did seem wrong, dramatic, or just not quite good enough. When I got straight A's, she'd mention how my cousin Beth never had to study as hard. When I made varsity soccer, she'd sigh about how Beth was naturally athletic while I had to work so hard at everything. By the time I was 18, I'd learned that keeping my head down and avoiding conflict was easier than fighting for recognition that never came anyway. College was my escape plan, but even there, Mom found ways to remind me I was the family disappointment. She'd call during finals to tell me about Beth's latest promotion or some award she'd won. I just think you could apply yourself more, Ellie. Beth has such natural confidence. Natural confidence. Right. What Beth had was parents who told her she was amazing every day of her life. But I thought all of that changed when I met James. James Morrison walked into my life during my senior year like he was sent by Central Casting to play perfect boyfriend. Tall, handsome in that all-American way, with a smile that made my professors pause mid-lecture when he walked into class late. He chose me. Out of all the girls on campus, he chose the quiet one who'd never felt chosen for anything. You're different, Ellie, he told me on our third date, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. You're real, not like these other girls who are always performing. I fell so hard I'm surprised I didn't leave a crater. James had this way of making me feel special and invisible at the same time. He'd bring me coffee during my library shifts and study with me until closing time. But when his fraternity friends came around, I'd somehow become background noise. Not invisible exactly, just less important than whatever they were discussing. You understand, right, babe? He'd say after essentially ignoring me for 2 hours, while his buddies planned some party I wouldn't be invited to. Guy time is important for bonding. I understood. I always understood. That was my specialty. When graduation came around, I was shocked when James suggested we move in together. Beth had been dating someone for 3 years and was still waiting for a ring, so this felt like winning some lottery I didn't even know I'd entered. My mom is going to love you, James said as we packed up my dorm room. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't compete with me for attention. At the time, I thought that was sweet. Now I know it was a warning. Meeting Karen was like meeting James's #1 fan and my harshest critic all rolled into one perfectly coiffed package. She assessed me like a show dog that might have potential, but probably needed extensive training. So lovely to meet you, dear, she said, air kissing near my cheek. James has told me so much about you. He says you're very practical. Practical. In Karen speak, that meant not exciting, but probably won't cause trouble. What I didn't realize then was that Karen had spent years feeling invisible in her own marriage, and James's attention made her feel young and desirable again. She'd always competed with me for any man's attention. Even my high school boyfriends got the full Karen charm treatment. I thought it was just her being friendly. Within 6 months of dating her son, my mother had somehow become James's biggest cheerleader and my most creative critic. The proposal happened exactly 18 months later, at the restaurant where we'd had our first official date. James had arranged for the staff to bring out a custom dessert with the ring hidden inside, and half the dining room applauded when I said yes. It was perfect. Picture perfect. Instagram perfect. The kind of proposal every girl dreams about. So why did I feel like I was watching it happen to someone else? Oh my goodness! I squealed, because that seemed like what someone was supposed to do. The ring was beautiful. A classic solitaire that probably cost more than my car. James beamed as I slipped it on, and the other diners cheered when he kissed me. Later that night, as we called our families with the news, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing a role in someone else's story. "Karen is going to be over the moon," James said, scrolling through his contacts. "She's been hoping for this since the day she met you." That should have made me happy. Instead, it made me wonder if my own feelings about getting engaged mattered to anyone, including myself. When we called my parents, Dad was thrilled. Mom was Mom. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant she was about to add a "but." "James is such a catch. You're lucky he's ready to settle down with someone like you. Someone like me." Translation: someone who wouldn't give him too much trouble or ask for too much attention. "Karen's already talking about venues," James said after we'd made all our calls. "She knows all the best places in the city, and she offered to help with planning since she has such good connections." "That's nice," I said, though something in my stomach twisted. "She just wants what's best for us, babe. Your mom gets so stressed about party planning, but Karen lives for this stuff. It'll be easier if she takes the lead." Easier for who exactly? But I nodded and smiled because that's what practical girls do. The next morning, Karen called before I was even fully awake. "Darling, I've already made appointments at 3 venues for this weekend. We need to move fast. The good places book up 18 months in advance, and you'll want to get married next fall, won't you?" Next fall? James and I hadn't discussed timing yet, but apparently Karen had. Sure, that sounds reasonable. Wonderful. I'll pick you up Saturday at 9. We have so much work to do. Wedding planning with Karen was like being enrolled in a masterclass called How to Disappear from Your Own Event. Every choice I made was gently corrected. The flowers I liked were too simple for a formal wedding. The dress style I preferred would overwhelm someone with my figure. The menu I suggested was not quite refined enough for James's side of the family. "Trust me, sweetie," she'd say after shooting down another one of my ideas. "I've been to a lot of weddings, and I know what works." What worked, apparently, was everything Karen would choose for herself. James thought his mother was being helpful. "She just has experience with these things, Elle. Your family doesn't really do big formal events, right?" "Right. My family celebrated birthdays at Olive Garden and thought the local country club was fancy. But that didn't mean I didn't have opinions about my own wedding. The breaking point came when we were tasting cakes. "The lemon is divine," Karen announced after trying one tiny bite. "This is definitely the one." "Actually," I said, "I really love the chocolate raspberry. It reminds me of the cake my grandmother used to make." Karen's smile tightened. "Chocolate is so heavy, and raspberry can be problematic if guests have allergies. We should go with something more universally appealing." "But it's our favorite," I insisted, looking to James for support. He shrugged. "Mom knows what she's talking about, babe. Besides, I'm not really a chocolate guy anyway." "Since when?" He'd eaten chocolate ice cream for dinner just last week when we were binge-watching Netflix. But apparently when his mother was around, his preferences shifted. We ordered the lemon cake. I smiled and nodded and told the baker it was perfect. That night, James was in an unusually good mood. "See? When you let Mom help, everything goes so much smoother. She's got this whole thing figured out." "Right," I said. "Smooth." But as our wedding day approached, I started noticing things that weren't smooth at all. Like how James would spend hours on the phone with his mother discussing details, but never asked what I thought about anything anymore. How Karen would show up at our apartment at random times, always with a key I didn't remember giving her. "I might need to let vendors in while you're at work," she'd explained when I questioned it. Plus, James gave me his spare key in case of emergencies. Emergency wedding planning. Sure, that made total sense. The final month before our wedding, Karen was at our place more than I was. Always fussing with something, always finding reasons to be there when James got home from work. "You're so lucky to have her help," my coworker Amanda said, when I mentioned feeling overwhelmed by all the planning. "Most future mother-in-laws are nightmares." Lucky. Right. I was the luckiest girl in the world. 3 days. I had 3 days to pretend everything was normal while planning the most satisfying revenge of my life. You'd think discovering your fiancé and mother were having an affair would send someone into a screaming, crying, throw everything breakable meltdown. Instead, I felt this weird, crystalline calm, like the universe had finally handed me the evidence I needed to prove I wasn't crazy. All those late-night emergency phone calls from Karen that James took in another room, all those times I'd come home to find them both looking slightly guilty about something they couldn't quite explain. The way my mother had suddenly become so invested in James's happiness that my own feelings about our wedding became irrelevant. I'd been gaslit so thoroughly that I'd started believing I was imagining things. But now I had proof. Photos, messages, voice notes where my mother giggled like a teenager, while my fiancé told her how beautiful she looked in the lingerie I'd bought for my honeymoon. the lingerie, that I'd bought, with money from the second job I'd taken to pay for our wedding. You know what, though? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't confront them immediately like some people might have. Instead, I went to work the next morning like nothing had changed. I smiled when James kissed me goodbye. I thanked my mother when she called to check on last-minute details. I confirmed final numbers with the caterer, double-checked the flower arrangements, and made sure our photographer knew the timeline for Saturday, because I was going to give them exactly the wedding they deserved. "You seem so calm," my maid of honor Jessica commented when we met for our final dress fitting Thursday afternoon. "Most brides are basket cases by now." "I'm just ready," I told her, which was absolutely true. The hardest part was acting normal around James. Wednesday night, he suggested we order pizza and watch a movie, something we used to do every week before wedding planning took over our lives. "Just like old times," he said, settling next to me on the couch with his arm around my shoulders. For a moment, I almost forgot about the betrayal. This was the James I'd fallen in love with. Relaxed, affectionate, making terrible jokes during commercial breaks. It would have been so easy to pretend I didn't know what I knew and just go through with everything. But then his phone buzzed with a text, and I watched his face light up as he read it. "Who is it?" I asked, though I already knew. "Just Mom confirming some stuff for Saturday. She's so excited." His thumb moved across the screen, typing a response that I was sure wasn't about flower arrangements. "I'm going to grab some water," I said, getting up from the couch. "You want anything?" "Nah, I'm good." From the kitchen, I could hear him typing another message, then another. By the time I came back, he'd put the phone away and was smiling at me like nothing had happened. "Ready for the big day?" he asked. "More than you know," I replied. And I meant every word. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, which I decided was perfect weather for what was about to happen. I woke up in my childhood bedroom where I'd spent the night as part of some old tradition about the bride and groom not seeing each other before the ceremony. Karen had insisted on it, probably so she could spend the night at our apartment with James without raising suspicions. Even on my wedding morning, she was still playing games. Jessica knocked on my door at 7 a.m. sharp, armed with coffee and that aggressive kind of cheerfulness that bridesmaids think is required by law. "Today's the day," she sang, setting down a tray with pastries I was too nervous to eat. "How are you feeling? Excited? Nervous? Ready to marry the man of your dreams?" I looked at myself in my childhood mirror, the same one where I'd practiced smile after smile trying to figure out how to make my mother proud of me. Today, I was going to make myself proud instead. "I'm ready for everyone to see exactly who James and my mother really are," I said. Jessica laughed. "You're so funny. Come on, let's get you into that dress." The dress was beautiful. I'd actually gotten to pick this one myself, back when I'd foolishly thought my opinion mattered. It was simpler than what Karen would have chosen. Clean lines, elegant without being flashy. The kind of dress you wear when you want to be remembered for what you say, not what you're wearing. Perfect for what I had planned. By 10 a.m., my bridal suite was full of people fussing over hair and makeup and flowers. My phone kept buzzing with texts from James. Sweet messages about how excited he was to marry me, how he couldn't wait to see me at the altar, how much he loved me. Each message felt like another knife in my back, but I responded with heart emojis and promises about forever. Let him think I was the same naive girl who'd believed his lies for the past 2 years. At 11:30, the wedding coordinator knocked on our door. "Time to go, ladies. The groom and his groomsmen are already at the church, and guests are starting to arrive." I stood up, smoothing my dress and checking my reflection one final time. My hair was perfect. My makeup was flawless. I looked like the picture of a happy bride. But in my bouquet, hidden among the white roses and baby's breath, was a manila envelope containing printed screenshots of every message, every photo, every piece of evidence of their betrayal. "Ready?" Jessica asked, linking her arm through mine. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. The ride to the church took 15 minutes. 15 minutes to think about how I'd spent 2 years planning a future with someone who'd been planning to humiliate me. 15 minutes to remember every time my mother had made me feel small and worthless and not quite good enough. 15 minutes to savor the fact that in about an hour, both of them would know exactly how it feels to be publicly humiliated. When our car pulled up to St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, I could see the crowd of guests already gathered. 300 people who thought they were here to witness a love story. They were about to witness something much more interesting than that. "Oh my God, Ellie, you look incredible," Jessica breathed as she helped me out of the car. "James is going to die when he sees you." "I'm counting on it," I replied. And for the first time in 3 days, I meant my smile completely. The church was packed. Every pew filled with faces I'd known my whole life, plus James's extended family and colleagues who'd flown in from 3 different states. The flowers were perfect. Karen had made sure of that. The lighting was romantic, the music was flawless, and the photographer was already capturing candid moments of guests arriving. It looked like the wedding of someone's dreams, just not mine anymore. I stood in the church vestibule with my father, watching through the glass doors as the last few guests found their seats. Dad looked handsome in his rented tuxedo, though I could tell he was nervous about walking me down the aisle without tripping. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, adjusting his tie for the third time. "James is a lucky man. Thanks." "Dad," I squeezed his arm, feeling a pang of guilt about what was coming. He had no idea his daughter was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of this perfect ceremony. Through the doors, I could see Karen in the front row, resplendent in powder blue silk and a hat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She was glowing with satisfaction, greeting late arrivals with the kind of smile that said she'd orchestrated every perfect detail, which of course she had, right down to sleeping with the groom. James stood at the altar looking impossibly handsome in his charcoal gray suit. From where I stood, I could see his profile as he chatted with his best man, probably making some joke about being nervous. He kept glancing toward the back of the church, waiting for his first glimpse of his bride. His completely clueless bride who was about to ruin his life in front of everyone he'd ever met. The wedding coordinator appeared at my elbow, clipboard in hand, and that slightly manic smile that meant we were officially on schedule. "Ready, Miss Thompson? The processional is about to begin." The first notes of the wedding march began to play, and I felt my heartbeat slow down rather than speed up. This was it. In about 5 minutes, I was going to do something that would change everything forever. Jessica and my other bridesmaids had already made their way down the aisle, each one beaming like they were walking toward their own happily ever after. The flower girl, James's 6-year-old niece, had scattered rose petals with the serious concentration of someone performing brain surgery. Now it was my turn. "Here we go," Dad whispered, offering me his arm. The doors opened, and 300 people rose to their feet. I could hear the collective intake of breath as they got their first look at the bride. Someone in the back whispered, "She looks gorgeous," and I almost laughed. If they thought I looked good now, wait until they heard my vows. We began the slow walk down the aisle, Dad's arm steady under mine. I kept my eyes focused on James, who was staring at me like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. His smile was so genuine, so full of love and anticipation, that for just a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Then I remembered the photos on my mother's phone, and the feeling passed. Halfway down the aisle, I made eye contact with Karen. She was dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, the picture of the emotional mother-in-law. When she saw me looking, she mouthed "beautiful" and gave me a thumbs up. The audacity was breathtaking, really. She'd spent the morning getting ready to watch her daughter marry the man she'd been sleeping with, and she was going to play the role of proud family member right until the very end. Well, the end was closer than she thought. Dad and I reached the altar, and James stepped forward to take my hand. His palm was slightly sweaty, and his smile was so wide I thought his face might crack. "You look incredible," he whispered as Dad kissed my cheek and took his seat next to my mother in the front row. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady as steel. "You have no idea what's coming." He laughed softly, thinking I was making some cute joke about wedding surprises. Behind him, the minister opened his book and smiled at our gathered family and friends. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of James Morrison and Ellie Thompson in holy matrimony." The ceremony began exactly as we'd rehearsed it. Readings about love and commitment and promises that last forever. A prayer about the sacred bond of marriage and the importance of trust and honesty between husband and wife. I almost snorted at that part, but managed to keep my expression appropriately reverent. Finally, we reached the moment I'd been waiting for. The minister smiled at us both and opened to the page where we'd written our personal vows. "James, you may begin," he said, offering the microphone. James had spent weeks writing his vows, reading draft after draft to me while we lay in bed together. They were beautiful, full of promises about growing old together and being each other's best friend and never letting anything come between us. He was 3 sentences in when I held up my hand. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church's excellent acoustics. "I'd like to say something first." The minister looked confused but handed me the microphone. James smiled indulgently, probably thinking I wanted to add something romantic before he finished. Behind me, I could feel 300 people leaning forward slightly, expecting to hear some sweet addition to our ceremony. What do you think will happen next? Can you imagine standing up there, knowing what Ellie knows, with everyone you love watching? Leave your predictions in the comments below. I turned to face our guests, microphone in hand, and felt a calm I'd never experienced before settle over me like armor. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady and clear. It means so much to have everyone we love gathered to celebrate this special moment. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the church. Someone in James's family said, "Aw," audibly. Karen beamed from the front row, probably thinking I was about to deliver some touching speech about family and new beginnings. "I have to be honest with you all," I continued, taking a small step away from James, who was starting to look confused. "This isn't going exactly the way I planned. See, 3 days ago, I discovered something about my groom and my mother." I pulled the manila envelope from my bouquet, the white roses falling to the floor. The church went completely silent. "I found out they've been having an affair." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Gasps erupted from every corner. James's face went white, then red. He reached for the microphone, but I stepped back. "Ellie, stop this right now," the minister said, moving toward me, but I was already pulling out the first photograph. "This is insane," James said, his voice cracking. "You're having some kind of breakdown." I held up the photo so the front rows could see it clearly. James and Karen in our bed, both grinning at the camera. The reaction was immediate and visceral. James's groomsmen started moving toward us, but I was faster. "These were taken last Tuesday while I was working to pay for this wedding," I announced quickly, pulling out more evidence before anyone could stop me. "Voice messages where my mother calls my fiancé my love, plans to break up with me during our honeymoon." "Security!" someone shouted from James's side of the family. But there was no security at a church wedding. Karen finally found her voice. "Ellie, stop this right now!" she shrieked, jumping to her feet. "You're embarrassing yourself!" I laughed into the microphone. "I'm embarrassing myself. There are photos of you in my bed with my fiancé, and I'm the one who should be embarrassed?" The minister was tugging at my arm now, and James's best man was approaching from the other side, but I had said what I came to say. I handed the microphone back to the bewildered minister and looked at James with more pity than anger. "You already ruined everything," I said quietly. "I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are." Then I turned and walked back down the aisle before anyone could stop me. Walking back down that aisle was like walking through a hurricane of whispers, gasps, and the rapid-fire clicking of phone cameras. Everyone wanted to document the moment when quiet little Ellie Thompson grew a backbone and served her cheating fiancé and mother their comeuppance on a silver platter. I kept my eyes straight ahead and my smile serene, like I was floating down the aisle at someone else's wedding where everything was going exactly according to plan, which, in a way, it was. Behind me, I could hear James's voice rising as he tried to do damage control, though I couldn't make out the specific words over the buzz of 300 people all trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Someone was crying, probably his grandmother, who'd spent the morning telling anyone who'd listen how proud she was of her grandson for finding such a sweet, stable girl. Sweet and stable. Right. I made it about halfway up the aisle before my father appeared at my side, looking simultaneously proud and concerned. "Need an escort?" he asked quietly, offering me his arm again. "Thanks, Dad," I said, grateful for his steady presence. "Though I think I can handle the rest on my own." "I know you can," he replied, "but you shouldn't have to." We walked together past guests who were still staring at me like I'd just performed actual magic. Mrs. Henderson from our old neighborhood was clutching her purse and shaking her head. James's college friends were recording everything on their phones with expressions of pure disbelief. And then there was the contingent of people who looked like they wanted to applaud but weren't sure if that was socially acceptable at a wedding that had just imploded in real time. As we reached the back of the church, I could hear the chaos really beginning behind us. Shouting voices, the scraping of chairs, what sounded like someone demanding answers right now. "Thank you very much." "Should we wait and see what happens?" Dad asked as we stepped into the vestibule. I glanced back through the glass doors at the scene unfolding in the sanctuary. James was surrounded by his groomsmen, all of them talking at once and gesturing wildly. Karen was still in the front row, but now she was arguing with my mother, who looked ready to throw hands despite being dressed in her best Sunday outfit. The minister was standing at the altar looking like he wished he'd chosen literally any other profession, while guests streamed toward the exits in various states of shock and excitement. "Nah," I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "I think I've seen enough." We walked outside into the gray afternoon, and I took my first deep breath of free air. It tasted different somehow, cleaner, like I'd been holding my breath for 2 years and finally remembered how to use my lungs. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," Dad said as we stood on the church steps, watching early arrivals from our wedding reception hurry toward their cars. "That took guts." "It took me finding evidence of their affair 3 days before my wedding," I corrected. "I probably should have spoken up a long time ago." "Maybe. But you spoke up when it counted." My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text messages, missed calls, social media notifications. Apparently, word of the wedding disaster was spreading faster than I'd expected. The first message was from Jessica. OMG, Ellie, are you okay? What do you need? The second was from my cousin Sarah. Holy shit, girl! That was epic! The third was from a number I didn't recognize. This is TMZ. We'd like to comment on today's wedding incident. Please call us back. TMZ. Seriously? I'd gone from bride to viral news story in less than an hour. We should probably get out of here, I said as more cars began pulling away from the church parking lot. Some guests were leaving, but others were clearly sticking around to see if the drama would continue in the parking lot. Your mother's going to want to talk to you, Dad warned as we walked toward his car. I looked back at the church one more time, where I could see Karen gesticulating wildly at someone just inside the doors. Mom's going to want to do a lot of things, I said. That doesn't mean I have to make them easy for her. Dad smiled. Where to? Home, I said. Then I paused. Actually, no, not home. James's stuff is there and Karen has a key. Let's go to that hotel downtown. The nice one with room service. The Marriott? The one with the penthouse suite. I'm about to be very single and very infamous. Might as well do it in style. I looked at Dad. Don't worry, I'll use the credit card we kept for emergencies. This definitely qualifies. Dad nodded approvingly. Your grandmother always said sometimes you have to spend money to save your sanity. As we drove away from St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, I rolled down the window and let the wind mess up my perfectly styled wedding hair. Behind us, the church parking lot was still full of cars and people who were probably going to be talking about this day for the next 10 years. And for the first time in my adult life, I was the one people would remember. Not my perfect mother with her perfect opinions and her perfectly inappropriate relationship with my ex-fiancé. Not sweet, stable Ellie who never caused trouble and always did what she was told. Just me. Finally, completely, authentically me. The woman who stood up in front of 300 people and refused to let anyone make her small ever again. The Marriott penthouse suite cost more for one night than I typically spent on groceries in a month, but considering I just saved myself the cost of a honeymoon in Maui, I figured I was still coming out ahead financially. Plus, I needed somewhere with really good room service and excellent Wi-Fi, because my phone had been buzzing nonstop for the past 3 hours. Ellie Thompson wedding disaster was trending on TikTok. Someone had live-streamed my entire altar speech on Instagram. A wedding guest had posted the whole thing to YouTube with the title, Bride exposes cheating groom and mother at their own wedding. Gone wrong. Gone wrong? I thought it had gone exactly right, personally. The hotel suite was ridiculous in the best possible way. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a marble bathroom bigger than my first apartment, and a king-size bed that had never been defiled by cheating fiancés and lying mothers. I ordered champagne and strawberries from room service, because if you're going to have the most public breakup in recent memory, you might as well celebrate properly. While I waited for my food, I started going through the messages that had accumulated on my phone. Most were supportive, some were horrified, and a few were from complete strangers who somehow got my number and wanted to share their own cheating spouse stories. But the most interesting message came from someone named Jennifer Chen at a company called Modern Wellness Media. Hi, Ellie. I'm a producer for a podcast about women's empowerment and overcoming toxic relationships. We'd love to have you as a guest to share your story. You've already inspired thousands of people in just the past few hours. Would you be interested in talking? Inspired thousands of people? I refreshed my social media and nearly choked on my champagne. The hashtag #DodgeForEllieTellsTheTruth had over 50,000 posts. Women were sharing their own stories of discovering affairs, standing up to manipulative family members, and finding the courage to leave toxic relationships. Someone had turned my altar speech into a motivational poster. Another person had made a TikTok remix of my mistakes versus relationship line that had already gotten 500,000 views. I wasn't just viral. I was accidentally inspiring people. My phone rang and Dad's name appeared on the screen. How are you holding up, sweetheart? He asked without preamble. Surprisingly well, I said, settling back into the ridiculously plush pillows. How's Mom handling everything? Your mother is processing. She's mainly angry at Karen right now, which is appropriate. She wants to know if you need anything. I'm fine. Really. Better than fine, actually. And James? I took a sip of champagne and considered the question. What about James? He's been calling the house. Wants to talk to you. I'm sure he does. He's probably figured out by now that his affair just cost him his job, his social standing, and his chance at inheriting anything from his grandmother, who looked ready to write him out of her will right there in the church. Dad chuckled. You always were smarter than people gave you credit for. I wasn't smart enough to see what was happening right under my nose for 8 months. You weren't paranoid enough, Dad corrected. That's different. Most people trust the people they love. That's not a character flaw, Ellie. Room service arrived with my champagne and strawberries, plus a complimentary bottle of wine from the hotel manager with a note that said, "From one strong woman to another. You've got this." Even the hotel staff were following my story. Dad, I think I'm going to stay here for a few days. I need to figure out what happens next, and I can't do that in an apartment where Karen has a key and James probably has half his stuff. That's smart. Do you want me to go get some of your things? Tomorrow, maybe. Tonight, I just want to order room service and watch terrible movies and pretend I'm not accidentally famous. You're not accidentally anything. Sweetheart, you planned that speech perfectly. He was right. I had planned it perfectly. Every word carefully chosen for maximum impact. Every piece of evidence organized for dramatic effect. I'd spent 3 days choreographing the most satisfying public humiliation in recent memory. And it had worked exactly the way I'd hoped. After Dad hung up, I opened my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I Googled myself. Ellie Thompson Bride returned over 2 million search results. News articles, blog posts, reaction videos, think pieces about toxic family dynamics and the courage it takes to speak truth in public spaces. One article called me the hero we didn't know we needed. Another described my actions as a masterclass in standing up for yourself with dignity and grace. A third article from a women's empowerment blog was titled, "What Ellie Thompson Can Teach Us About Reclaiming Our Power." I'd gone from unknown bride to accidental feminist icon in less than 6 hours. My email was flooded with interview requests, speaking opportunities, and invitations to appear on podcasts and talk shows. Publishers wanted to know if I was interested in writing a book. A literary agent had sent a 3-page email about my remarkable story and its commercial potential. Commercial potential. I was now a brand. But the message that made me smile the most was from my college friend Amanda. "Saw your wedding video. About damn time you showed everyone who you really are. Call me when you're ready to figure out what comes next. I have ideas." Amanda worked for a nonprofit that helped women leave abusive relationships. She understood better than anyone what it took to walk away from people who were supposed to love you, but only knew how to control you. I closed the laptop, poured myself another glass of champagne, and looked out at the city lights spread below my ridiculous hotel suite. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out how to build a life that was completely mine. Tonight, I was just going to enjoy being the woman who refused to be small anymore. By Monday morning, my story had reached every major news outlet in the country. Good Morning America wanted me for an interview. The View sent a formal invitation. My Instagram following had jumped from 300 followers to over 200,000 in 48 hours. People were calling me brave, inspiring, iconic. Someone started a GoFundMe to help Ellie start her new life, which I immediately had taken down because I wasn't a charity case. I was just a woman who'd finally found her voice. But the real surprise came when my phone rang Tuesday afternoon with a call from Meridian Communications, one of the biggest PR firms in the state. "Ms. Thompson, this is Patricia Williams from Meridian. We've been following your story and we'd like to discuss some opportunities with you." "What kind of opportunities?" I asked, though I had a feeling I knew where this was going. Speaking engagements? Brand partnerships? Possibly a book deal. Your message about standing up to manipulation and toxic relationships is resonating with a lot of people. There's real commercial value in what you represent. Commercial value. There it was again. "I'm not sure I want to monetize the worst day of my relationship," I said carefully. "With respect, Ms. Thompson, it wasn't the worst day of your relationship. It was the first day of your new life. And there are thousands of women out there who need to hear how you found the courage to take that step." She had a point. My DMs were flooded with messages from women sharing their own stories of emotional manipulation, cheating partners, and toxic family members. They weren't just following my story for entertainment. They were looking for permission to make their own dramatic exits from situations that were slowly killing their spirits. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "A 6-month contract. We'll handle your media bookings, speaking engagements, and brand partnerships. You focus on sharing your story and helping other women. We split the revenue 70-30. Your favor. 70-30. For 6 months of talking about the most painful experience of my life, I could potentially make more money than I'd ever seen at my marketing job." "I need to think about it," I said. "Of course, but Ellie, may I call you Ellie? You have something rare. You have a story that matters and the authenticity to tell it in a way that actually helps people. That's not something you can manufacture." After she hung up, I sat in my hotel room staring at my phone and thinking about authenticity. For 26 years, I'd been performing the role of the good daughter, the supportive girlfriend, the woman who never caused trouble. The person I'd been at that altar was the most authentic version of myself I'd ever shown the world. Maybe it was time to lean into that. My first speaking engagement was at a women's business conference in Chicago the following weekend. Patricia had booked it as a test run, 45 minutes talking about finding your voice in toxic relationships to 300 professional women. I was terrified. Just tell your story, Patricia coached me over the phone. Don't try to be motivational or inspirational. Just be honest about what happened and how you found the courage to act. The ballroom in Chicago was packed. 300 women in business suits and name tags, all staring at me like I might have the secret to transforming their lives. I told them about growing up small, about learning to make myself invisible to avoid conflict. I talked about the slow erosion of self-trust that happens when someone you love consistently makes you question your own reality. I described the moment when I found those text messages and realized I wasn't crazy. I was just dating a liar. But mostly I talked about the decision. That moment when you realize you can either accept being treated badly forever, or you can make a scene that changes everything. The hardest part, I said, looking out at those 300 faces, wasn't standing up at the altar. It was deciding that my dignity was worth more than their comfort, that my truth was more important than their lies. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, women lined up to talk to me, to share their own stories, to ask for advice, to tell me that my wedding disaster had given them permission to leave their own toxic situations. "You saved my marriage," one woman told me. "I saw your story and realized I'd been enabling my husband's emotional abuse for years. We're in therapy now, and for the first time, he's actually listening." "You helped me leave my job," said another. "I've been working for a boss who humiliates me daily, and I kept telling myself it was just business. But watching you stand up to your fiancé made me realize I don't have to accept being treated like garbage anywhere." By the time I flew home from Chicago, I'd made more money in one weekend than I'd made in 3 months at my old job. But more importantly, I'd found something I didn't know I was looking for, a purpose that was entirely my own. Patricia was right. I did have something rare. Not just a viral story, but the ability to help other people find their own voices by showing them mine. 2 weeks later, I signed the contract with Meridian Communications. 6 months of speaking engagements, media appearances, and brand partnerships that aligned with my message about empowerment and authenticity. I wasn't going to be famous forever. Viral stories have short shelf lives. But while I had the platform, I was going to use it to help other women stop making themselves small, starting with the woman in the mirror, who'd finally learned that being difficult was better than being invisible. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a 1-bedroom place in the Arts District that I'd furnished entirely according to my own taste, without input from anyone who thought they knew better than I did, when my phone rang with news that changed everything. "Ellie, it's Patricia. Are you sitting down? Should I be? HarperCollins wants to offer you a book deal. 5 figures for a memoir about toxic relationships and finding your voice. It's not huge money, but it's a real publisher with real distribution. They're calling it Standing at the Altar, a woman's guide to choosing herself." I looked around my apartment at the life I'd built in 6 months of refusing to be anyone other than myself. The walls were painted the deep teal color I'd always loved but never dared to use. My bookshelves held novels I'd chosen because I enjoyed them, not because they made me look smart or sophisticated. The kitchen counter displayed a coffee maker that made exactly the kind of coffee I liked, not what someone else preferred. "A book deal?" I repeated. "They want you to write about the journey from discovering the affair to building your new life. Not just the dramatic moments, but the quiet work of learning to trust yourself again." The publisher thinks it could help a lot of people. Through my window, I could see the coffee shop where I'd started meeting with other women who'd left toxic situations. It had begun as informal conversations. Women who'd heard me speak and wanted to keep talking about the messy, complicated work of rebuilding your life after you stop accepting crumbs. Now it was a weekly gathering that sometimes filled the entire back room. Women supporting other women through divorces, career changes, family estrangements, and the 1,000 small acts of courage it takes to choose yourself over everyone else's expectations. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "The publisher wants to know if you'd be interested in a follow-up book about helping other women find their voices, based on your work with the support groups." I thought about the woman who'd approached me after my speech last week, a 35-year-old mother who'd been financially supporting her adult siblings for years, while her own children went without new clothes. She'd been carrying the weight of everyone else's problems for so long that she'd forgotten she was allowed to have needs of her own. "I'm interested," I said. "Both books, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I want part of the proceeds to go toward funding support groups for women leaving toxic relationships. Real support, legal aid, therapy, job training, whatever they need to build independent lives. I'm sure we can work that out. And I want to be very clear that this isn't a revenge story. It's not about getting back at people who hurt you. It's about learning that you're worth more than whatever scraps of love other people are willing to give you." because that was the truth I'd learned in the 6 months since my wedding day. James and Karen had done me a favor, in their own twisted way. They'd forced me to choose between accepting their lies or standing up for my own reality. I'd chosen myself, finally, completely, without apology. The book deal would give me some financial stability to do this work part-time. The speaking engagements had been modestly successful, bringing in enough to supplement my income, but they were still building. Books lasted longer, though. Books could reach women who would never attend a conference or follow my social media, but who might pick up something called standing at the altar during a particularly dark moment and realize they weren't alone. One more thing, I said to Patricia. I want to dedicate the book to my father. Any particular reason? He's the one who taught me that being proud of someone means supporting their choices, even when you don't understand them, even when those choices cause a scene at a wedding. After Patricia hung up, I called Dad to tell him about the book deal. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Not because you're writing a book or making money or any of that. I'm proud because you're happy." He was right. I was happy. Not the desperate, performative happiness I'd felt when I was trying to be who other people wanted me to be, but the quiet satisfaction that comes from building a life that actually belongs to you. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about women who chose themselves over everyone else's expectations. Because sometimes the best thing you can do for the people you love is show them what it looks like to refuse to be small. My name is Ellie Thompson, and 6 months ago, I was about to marry a man who was sleeping with my mother. Today, I'm an author with a book deal who helps women find their voices and leave toxic situations. The woman I became at that altar wasn't a character I was playing. She was who I'd always been underneath all the people-pleasing and conflict avoidance. She was just waiting for the right moment to introduce herself to the world. And trust me, it was worth the wait.